Hey there, and welcome back to a special episode in my new player guide series. Kind of just a guide series in general. This is all focused on the DLC, as are all of the other ones that I've been doing recently. And this is a special episode because I wanted to cover a fun and interesting DLC topic in a short blast as opposed to an earlier version of this where, well, it's kind of the opposite of a previous guide in this series. This has been highly requested. It's one that a lot of folks have asked for, and so I decided to finally get out and do it. This is going to be covering the 10 worst cards in game as seen by me. So I have to provide a lot of context for what that means, why and how I'm evaluating this, and what matters. So, unlike the 10 best cards, I actually think there is a lot less contention in the 10 worst cards. Most Covenant 25 with DLC enabled players will probably agree with me to some extent. Now, you might put them in a different order. A lot of people will rank these based on how much they hate them. So, how many times they've been betrayed by them, they tried it and it's terrible and they've lost runs because of it. The human brain naturally kind of hyper fixates on things that we dislike that make us angry. So, if you've seen more bad runs with specific cards, they're going to be sticking in your mind more. You probably hate those cards more. So you might take these in different orders, but I'm pretty sure everyone is going to look at this and go, yeah, that card's bad. So there's that. One thing I want to say is that units, right? So units, non-champions, in general, I value good infusions pretty highly. So I think that a bad card, a card that is not good as far as units are concerned, but is an effective infusion in a decent number of cases on average, those cards are pretty okay. Those are going to be functional. So there's that. I also think that in general, I find banner units pretty important to the run. It's hard for me to say that they're terrible. Some of them I would say are pretty terrible, but most of them are decent at worst because they're necessary to winning a run. That said, banner units are also potentially detrimental because taking them can actually have a negative effect on your run by preventing you from seeing other more important banner units earlier in your draw order. So, in that respect, a really bad banner unit might rank really bad, like really low on my scale, because it is actively detrimental to your run. Beyond just you draw it and it's annoying, it actually hurts you. So, keep that in mind. I also think token units suffer a lot. Token units being non-banner units that you draft from card packs, right? These units suffer a lot in these rankings because they are typically low impact, have extremely low synergy, and sometimes they have anti-synergy with a line that you'd normally want to run them with, which is pretty tough. The other side of that is also that they get in the way of other cards, such as things like Channel Song or Prism Retrieval card fetching plays, and that can be a real problem. So there's that. Some of them are good. The other problem is they take space. Space is a premium asset for your run, and most lines don't have spare space, and so having them is genuinely bad. Furthermore, units are tough because the rally trigger is so rare in the run. Literally one unit has it, and it's a champion on your side. So you don't benefit from playing the units, and the other challenge there is that they are not things like incants, and an incant is a very important trigger for the run, for the game in general. So it's not a spell. This is also even worse in the case of things like Spine Chief, for instance, who desperately needs to be playing Inspire triggers usually, and you can't put a unit when you have such a big champion and other things. You can't fit that thing in the floor. So token units typically suffer. A number will show up on this list, and a number are in my honorable mentions. The next thing I want to say is that most bad spells are generally they're bad because they're overcosted for what they do, but they're not awful if you do have to take them or if they make sense. So spells in general are pretty okay. It's going to be fairly rare for me to look at a 0 Ember card that is a spell that also takes no space and say it's bad. It might be a low impact, but there are cases where you just want density, and maybe if your card draw is strong enough, you're happy to take a 0 cost card that does something that you can play. They also matter a lot for, obviously, like I just said, Inspire and Incant lines. So those are, I mean, that's 2 out of the 6 clans right there. So it's pretty regular that I find myself wanting to play 0 cost, low impact things. So they're going to be pretty hard for me to call bad. They would have to be really, really bad. The other thing is that some of the worst offenders are ultimately just kind of okay, right? Even if they're low impact, it's like it's fine, right? There are some cases where I will take a 0 cost card, even if it does literally nothing, because it is Inspire/Incant. So there's that. It's also worth saying if it enables an infinite in some fashion, so an infinite being the ability to play cards repeatedly and essentially just one turn a boss, or if it enables a pseudo-infinite, it's pretty unlikely that I'm going to call it that bad. I don't play infinites that often because I find that they lack in consistency. They're very high rolly, right? If you hit them, you feel really strong, you get ridiculous scores, which is great for score junkie kind of players. That's not what I do. I play for consistency. I want to win every run. And so I play very safe and very reserved in that respect. And so chasing an infinite is oftentimes a detriment because it forces you to remove cards that would otherwise be helpful answers to certain problems because you need to get down to a certain number to enable the infinite. Obviously, you know, etc., etc., not all infinites require that. Fine. There are exceptions to all of these rules, but I'm just kind of giving you some overarching thoughts here. So if a card says it draws something, it's probably pretty decent, right? You can't look at that and say that's objectively bad. The other thing is that I want to say that I consider consume a benefit in almost all cases, because if you only draw it once and then it goes away, that is very powerful. This is doubled on cards that are frozen because you draw it once and then you can play it whenever and it never has to be a problem for you. So, you know, consume is generally a benefit. Also, there's the etch lines which exist theoretically in some cases with Wormkin. Now, as a result, you're probably not going to see any consume cards in here except in egregious cases. So that's kind of what that is. Theoretically, champions qualify. So theoretically, champions qualify for this. I am evaluating them. It's pretty rare that a champion is going to be that bad, but yeah, I am evaluating them in this, so that's something to keep in mind. And let's see. One other thing I do want to say is I am also including the clanless cards. So if we go up here and go to clanless, I skipped these in the best cards list because these cards are designed to be strong or efficient. They're designed to be balanced ahead of other cards. And I didn't want to just turn this into, well, Excavated Ember is objectively the best card in game because if you had infinite of them, you automatically infinite and you win. You just kind of go crazy. So fine, the card is literally never bad. I didn't want to talk about it. Now in the case of the worst cards, however, they are, if they're bad, then they should get called out here, right? So I am including them here. Spoilers, though, none of them are that bad. Most of them are not great. There's one that made it to honorable mentions, but none of them are that bad. Obviously, I'm not counting curses because curses are just, duh, obviously they're terrible. But otherwise, it would be like, well, duh, Vengeful Shard's the worst one. Whatever. Get off my back. That's not an interesting video. You know I don't want to say that. So obviously a curse is a bad card. You don't need me to tell you that. Worst card in most of my decks is usually not deadweight, but sometimes it is. So fair enough. I've also, as before, I've taken context into my picks. So when you have any of these cards, it means you have the clan associated with it. You have the rest of that clan for better or worse. This means, you know my opinions if you watch the channel. If you don't, I think Umbra's pretty terrible in the DLC meta, and I think that some of the relics and some of the clans like Melting are really strong. So naturally, you might expect that there are probably fewer Melting cards in this list than there are Umbra cards. That said, Umbra has some pretty good cards, and its problems stem from other things, so you don't know. Hard to say. I think there's actually a pretty decent selection, a good variety here of worst cards here. So You'll see some things from all clans, I'm pretty confident. Maybe. At least I'll have mentioned them all in the honorable mentions section. Speaking of honorable mentions, there are some really nasty cards that I wanted to include in this, but I'm doing a top 10, so at the end I have an honorable mentions if you feel like hearing about some other terrible things. I'm not going to spend too much time on each one, but I'm at least going to call them out and kind of give you an overarching why this is terrible. And that should be all the context you need up front to talk about this. Whew, a lot of explanation up front, so hopefully that wasn't too annoying. But yeah, as a reminder, you can leave a comment with your ideas. You can argue with me on your opinions. I'm happy to chat in the comment section. Also happy to chat on Discord, of course. I have that server. It's in the top right of my channel. I guess you can see it. It's a link. It's kind of fun. I'm very active on Discord, so you can kind of chat me up if you want. I'm always happy to talk Monster Train stuff and other things, because NASA's cool and stuff. So yeah, you can leave that comment. You can talk to me wherever you want. If you have any other ideas for other guides, great, let me know. Otherwise, like the video, subscribe, etc. If you want to see more, always appreciated. So let's get in. Now, we're going to start with number 10. So this is the 10th worst card, which is basically, I'm doing the absolute worst card last. So this is like number 10 on the list, but it's going in reverse order, right? So we're going to work up to what I consider the worst card in the game. And hilariously, the worst card in the game, the 10th worst card in the game, actually is a champion. There is a champion, in my opinion, that is so bad that it actually deserves to rank among the 10 worst cards, in my opinion. I toiled over this a lot, and I think it needs to be said. I'm going to spin this, and you're going to think, okay, who is this? It is Tethys. Yeah, Tethys is abysmal. So this is an important point. Most champions are really good. Like, they're very functional, critical elements of your line. I also want to explicitly say that Tethys finds her way into a lot of my endgame lines because I have her and I can't get rid of her. And if you have it, you're forced to take it. You might as well use it. So if you can use it, I usually try to weasel her into my runs. Now, so she obviously features on a lot of my thumbnails. She features in a lot of my default Stygian runs. I play her. I have to play her. I have no choice when I'm playing a rotating series. So she gets played a lot. But she's extremely, extremely bad. Conduit is a really powerful line in the late game. She's kind of like a mollusk mage in that she's does very little and has very little in the way of stats, but she has an aura effect to your floor that is very powerful. This presents a lot of early game problems with her. If you miss Chillwind early game, you just get sent to the Shadow Realm because your floor does literally what? It's like 5 damage from 2 train stewards and then Tethys in the back doing 5 damage or something. So this is the world where you do 15 damage on a floor and you can't even capitalize on her spell weakness because the enemy comes up in Relentless and then goes to the Pyro Room. And if you play on a lower floor, you can't get more train stewards in front, or they all die, or she dies. She also is the quintessential example of late game struggles into every mechanic in the DLC. Spikes with a sweeper. She only has 12 HP. She's dead. She dies in 1 round attacking into spikes. Great. You can't give her quick because she's a champion. She's not a unit. You can't give her HP. You can't give her multi-strike. She has nothing. So, and Chillwind is fine into Relentless. Sometimes she kind of saves the run and is functional. As long as you get a couple rounds, you're okay into Relentless. But it's one big hit. And if a frontline dude gets upgraded and it's one big hit, you're just eating everything else. You're relying on the fact that Stygian is a really good clan to prop up how bad Tethys is. And she's so risky in the early game. So risky that you have to put yourself on the back foot in order to not die so that you can then ramp up later. Whereas most champions, they're really strong if they're strong in the early game. Even if they fall off, you can use them to power up and then snowball. Tethys prevents you from snowballing. And so she's extremely bad in that respect. I could talk for a long time about why Tethys is so terrible. And the truth is, I think at a minimum, if she just had much better stats, I'm talking like 30 HP on all paths here, and at least 25 damage on the top level sweep path, I think it'd be functional. I would argue that's functional. I'm okay with it. But the fact that she struggles, you bake her into your line, and then you spend half the run going, okay, how do I keep Tethys from dying if I need her? If you need her, she is a nightmare. I would rather have Mollusk Mage than I would rather have Tethys in most cases. And that says something, because you don't have draw priority on Mollusk Mage. But I could put upgrades in him. I could do literally anything. I could take his infusion and do something with it. Tethys is ridiculously bad, and she deserves the number 10 slot. So let this kind of pave the way for what I consider to be really bad. If Tethys, which I can complain about an astronomical amount, shows up at number 10, how bad must the other cards be? Well, we'll get there. Number 9, let's go. Number 9 is possibly one of the more contentious picks. I went back and forth on this one a lot. I actually think it's a Wormkin card. The really bad, nasty card here is Total Recall. So let me quantify this a little bit. Total Recall looks decent at a glance. There's one of the problems with... I'm going to get so much flack for this. I just know it. I've talked to people who go to bat for this card, and I get it. I understand. But even in etch lines, very regularly, especially because you're playing Echo Right, if you're trying to do etch lines, almost always, you're going to be looking to repeater or Wormkin etchings very specific cards. You want to be cultivating your consume pile so that you are etching strong plays. And it's pretty rare to find a quote-unquote consume everything kind of run where you just want to burn every spell in your deck as an asset for an etch trigger. Obviously, you can do that with Shellsmith and things like that. You might consider it for a Bog Deep Cocoon line. You might consider it for a First of Kin line in some cases. And Total Recall can help with that. It is itself an etch. It will burn random things. The problem is it's an unbounded problem, right? It doesn't choose cards. You don't know what you're getting. And most of the time, some of your cards are important. And if you have a card, if you draw this on turn 2 of any given combat, for instance, and you play this, if you had a card on turn 1 you didn't want to get burned, you could lose it. And that could cost you the run. It is, in most cases, actively detrimental when it is in your deck. This is one of the few Wormkin cards that if I start with it in my starting deck, 9 times out of 10 I remove it. It is so bad that playing it is genuinely terrible. Now, getting it in your starter is not the end of the world, right? Because maybe it is the only consume card you have, and therefore, okay, I have to play it because, well, I need things for my etch triggers on Shellsmith on ring 1. Okay, I mean, there's that. But alternatively, you could just not play it and pick it like Marsh Lord or something and not have problems. Echo Right is a strong enough champion that you can work around this without much issue. I think this card is genuinely bad. I think that it is a bait. I see people kill themselves with it a lot. I see even good players try to use this and fail. And the number of times where I've seen that this be even remotely useful, you could have just removed it and played your run without it, and it's just as strong. So I think this card is absolutely terrible. It is, and it crosses the boundary into actively detrimental in a lot of cases. And that, to me, is a pretty important boundary where a card starts qualifying for, worst card in game. So that's Total Recall. I'm prepared to accept flack for that one. I know there's a lot of fans out there for it. Next card we're going to cover is number 8, Cave In. Okay. You may know a rule of mine. I generally consider movement cards very powerful. There's a lot of reasons for this. Movement is a strong utility in the game. It allows you to disrupt enemy lines. It synergizes with things like Iron Drop Cage. It's pretty good. It allows you to overstack floors. Pretty solid. The problem with Cave In is that it actively hurts you at the same time that it does anything to the enemies. Think about, for instance, you're playing a floor on top floor. You have Iron Drop Cage. You have Cave In. Not only are you paying 2 Ember for this, which is extremely overpriced for what it does, but if you play it on a floor, it drops things, including your own units, So you don't capitalize on the drop cage days of the enemies because you have dropped them. So your next argument might be, well, just play on the bottom floor, dummy. Okay, well, great. You overstack all your floors, you're playing on the bottom, and enemies now spawn on middle because you have overflowed bottom. You do all this work for what? That effect that usually you're never setting up fast enough. And this is context dependent as well, right? Because Umbra suffers a lot from overstack. You have to put morsels on the floor. You could say, I'm going to drop in morsels with cave in, but also, wouldn't it just be better to just play the morsels in general? And all gorge lines are really slow, so you need to set them up on top floor anyway. How in the world are you killing anything with a gorge line downstairs if you have to cave in every turn to bring in morsels? You immediately have to answer enemies on turn 1. It's bad business. It just doesn't work out in your favor. And all of the normal synergies, like, think about Hidden Passage. I love that card because I can move things up. Moving to top floor, moving up in general is better than moving down. I can also just disrupt. I can move a big tank in front out of the way into the back of a line. And I can play Hidden Passage with Drop Cage repeatedly on the Divinity or something and just daze the hell out of it. Whereas with Cave In, you don't have that ability. This card is, when played, very regularly actively detrimental, whereas all the other movement cards are really good. All of them. I can't think of another movement card I would consider bad, whereas Cave-In is just so astronomically terrible. And like the spirit of the thing is cool, right? The idea behind it, they're trying to be like, ooh, yeah, you drop in morsels or something, right? They even have it in the art up here, but it doesn't pan out. It doesn't functionally behave the way they want. Right? It would be even better if it were just friendlies or just enemies. Split this up into 2 cards, actually, and they both become significantly better. And the fact that this thing also costs 2 for the effect that is actively detrimental, man, that's rough. This is a bad card. This is tough. So, yeah, that's going to have to be my number 8. Now, next, number 7. It is Wildwood Custodian. Look, his card text says draw +1 each turn. That sounds good, right? Here's the problem. This unit does nothing. You have to protect this unit. You have to put it on a floor and somehow keep it alive. You pay 1 ember for this. It has 2 life. It does nothing else. Even its infusion. Like, what are you doing here? Okay, cool. I could infuse this into a Siren, I guess, and maybe get more incants. But you know what else I could do? I could self-infuse the Siren and then just make my existing incants more efficient. This is not that good. Plus, because I have to have Ember for that card I'm drawing, which makes it just worse in this use case. So even in its ideal situation where you're trying to stack it on a floor, it's just tough. This is actually an interesting card that would be kind of nice to just ascend into a floor, right? But it doesn't help that the only movement card in Awoken is one of the worst movement cards. It's not as bad as Cave-In. It does not make this list. Okay, so spoilers. Restoring Retreat is not on my top 10 worst cards. It definitely was a runner-up, though. So it's tough. Wildwood Custodian is so low impact that I usually remove this before Train Stewards. That's pretty rough, right? It costs 1, it does nothing, it doesn't help. Even in the early game, it has very little value. It just, what? You have, I don't know, Sentient, Train Steward, then you put this in. Problem is, it's actively detrimental if your Sentient happens to be Cultivate, which most Sentients are. And then Sentient gives you a Draw Relic anyway. Because Cultivating Sentient is just, I'm Wildwood Custodian, but a million times better. Right? There's nothing else there. It's just kind of that. And it steals cultivates from your floor, which is bad for every reason, right? It's just terrible. It's like I considered things like Edge Prior are rough for the same reason. You can't play Edge Prior with an Awoken Hollow because it steals all the cultivates from the thing you want to put it on. So Wild Custodian, though, is just objectively worse, in my opinion. At least Edge Prior has a very good infusion. It has moments where you really desperately want that. Really good with Steel Singer in general, I would argue. It can sometimes just be really strong. Wild Custodian does not get carried by its infusion in any such way. It doesn't even get stats with this. How bad is that? Give this thing 15 life and I might genuinely take it sometimes, but it's just nothing draw +1. It's like bad root seeds. Bad everything. Wild Custodian is It's yeah, I mean, it is actively detrimental. It is a bad card to play. It hurts everything in your deck. It hurts consistency with Channel Song and other things that you might want to do, and it does absolutely nothing. So you just kind of play it and go, all right, well, I guess it died. I might actually accept it. I would definitely rank it out of this list if it were zero cost, right? If it were zero cost, fine. You can at worst yeet it because it technically consumes, right? A unit goes away. But if you have to play one Ember for this, what are you doing with this? Just remove it. It's basically bad Train Steward, and that is saying something. So that's number 7. Now we're moving on to number 6. All right, look, you knew it was coming. Inflame. This is a spell, okay? This spell is so atrocious that if you made it cost 1, I would still tell you this card is terrible. It would be better, but I would still tell you it's terrible. Think about Fortify. Fortify costs 0 and gives you 5 armor, okay? That's 2 Ember difference, and you're only getting 4 Rage, which is not even half of what you get from a Ritual of Battle. This card is so inefficient. This card cultivates and is accumulation of all of the worst possible choices. It's overcosted. Both effects are counterproductive, right? You want to put Rage on your backline because really you want your backline to be doing most of the damage. You want to put armor on your front line. Usually these are not the same unit, so you don't even really benefit from both effects in most cases. Thirdly, all of the effects are low numbers, so what the heck? You don't even get value when you do play it. And then you just keep going in that this thing costs 50 gold to get down to 0 cost, where I actually think it's fine. And that 50 gold could have gone into -1s literally anywhere else. It's just, it's tough. I have at times used this because sometimes you're so desperate for any kind of anything that you take what you can get. But even in the most optimal cases, right? Consider I've had runs where I have Resonant Shard, which means that Rage is an extra +1 effective, and Armor where I had Railhammer, which was +4 armor. I've had runs where I've had both of those, and I have still skipped Inflame, because even with those buffs, it is still inefficient compared to other cards. Branding Right, for example, is just astronomically better from a Rage perspective. It also triggers Revenge triggers. Wow, look at that. Meanwhile, you've then got Ritual of Battle, which just blows this out of the water in terms of scaling power to a ridiculous degree. This card is bad. You would need to make this card 0 cost, and I would click it pretty regularly. 1 cost, I probably still skip it quite a bit. You could buff the numbers and like Rage 4, Armor 5, and I might take this a few more times, right? It's not that terrible, but I don't know. Inflame is terrible. So, great. Awesome. I don't really have anything else to say. This card doesn't really do much. It just kind of sucks. So, that's number 6. Now we're getting into some real stinkers. Next, we have Cuddle Hex at number 5. Cuddle Hex is like Wildwood Custodian, but even worse, right? This actually is actively detrimental to play in most cases. It freezes something randomly, which in some cases can actually get in the way of drawing better cards. It can also it can clog your deck if you can't empty your hand, right? So let's say, like, it clogs your hand if you can't empty it, right? Let's say you have 3 Ember and you played Cuddle Hex like some kind of an insane person. This thing will freeze things that you're not playing, and it's not like you're going to suddenly be able to play it the following turn. I've had cases where my hand has been filled by Cuddle Hex, and I'm only drawing like 3 cards. This thing is terrible. So all of the reasons I hated on Wildwood Custodian, now imagine that it's even worse, because drawing a card is fine, but Cuddle Hex's effect is just so terrible. This card is bad. Like, just horrible. I'm pretty confident this is yeah, we're getting to the point where this is like almost the worst token unit in game. So I don't have to actually say too terribly much here because I've already talked about a lot of the reasons Wildwood Custodian is terrible, but yeah, Cuddle Hex is even worse. And now, speaking of the worst token unit in game, I think the worst token unit in game is, wait for it, Glacial Seal. I am blown away by the fact that this thing got nerfed to its current point at some point in history. You pay 2 Ember for Glacial Seal. Look, I know, if you have an infinite in your run, I get infinite Frostbite. Look, it's not good. Literally any other infinite is better. Come on. And it's not even like Glacial Seal is not even helping with the infinite. It is just kind of the vector by which the infinite does damage. Literally anything that says incant can do that, right? Except for maybe Guardian Stone. But at least Guardian Stone is good, right? And at least Guardian Stone only costs 1 Ember. 2 Ember for this thing. It's almost unplayable. It's a bad token unit. It even has worse stats than all the others. Somehow Wildwood Custodian has 1 more HP than Glacial Seal. Who could tell you why? Glacial Seal is so astronomically bad, I skip this even with Founding Seal. You literally double my incant triggers and I look at this thing and go, yeah, that's bad. This is backline clear, except it doesn't clear backline before it kills your units. It's like a bad glimmer. If this thing did 2 damage on incant, or cooking, I could do it. I could do it with 2 damage on incant. You don't even need the frostbite. Just do 2 AoE damage on incant, and I would get it out of it gets out of the bottom of the barrel. But as it stands, this thing is hilarious. It is so funny how bad this card is. And the infusion is not even any better. What are you going to do? What are you going to put this into another totem? Wouldn't you literally want to put anything else into your other totem? It's just terrible. It's so hard to play. With Forever Flame, I might go, all right, maybe at 0 cost. But even then, I skip it a lot. It's tough. This card is very bad. It is absolutely the worst token unit in the game. And among the worst cards. Number 4, so bad. Ugh, Glacial Seal. All right. Now we're getting into the bottom 3. I think these bottom 3 are pretty much guaranteed to be the ones you're thinking of. If you've, 1, listened to me ever before, 2, played the game yourself, or 3, can think kind of remotely, solidly about strategy here. Let's get into number 3. This is the worst spell in the game. It is, yep, you guessed it, Hoarfrost Effigy. Read this card for a second. You pay 3 Ember for this. It says transfer all Frostbite on this floor to a unit, then double the amount of Frostbite. Okay. This card is terrible. The Divinity has Purify, which removes all Frostbite at the end of a turn. So even if you somehow, by some miracle, did a super huge setup on this, it just removes it. You might be able to do that in Relentless, but if you can do that in Relentless, you're going to win anyway. You didn't need this card. You generated enough Frostbite in Relentless. It's fine. And this card is so bad, even in its optimal situation, where I'm loading up floors with Frostbite, it's actively detrimental in such a massive way to transfer the Frostbite off of heavies onto a single unit. Think about the ideal case here. The ideal case here is you have a mini-boss floor on the Divinity, right? And you can kill everything, right? And you apply, I don't know, 3 big chunks of 50 damage Frostbite or something, and then you draw this on the perfect turn. You somehow have the Ember to play it, and you play it on that mini-boss. Oh man, that mini-boss dies over 5 rounds. Okay, you play this on bottom, maybe you actually kill it before it reaches the pyre. But think about this. You know what would be better than that? I don't know, just kill the dang thing, right? Maybe just don't take this card and do literally anything else, and you're going to be better off in dealing with that. It's insane to me to look at this card and then go, yeah, this card exists in the same game that Crushing Demise exists in. What are you talking about? This card was bad before the DLC, and it didn't even have Purify, because there were so few cases where this would actually win you the run, and there are even fewer cases where this does literally anything for you. Drafting this card is trolling. You are literally griefing yourself if you put this in your deck. It is that bad. And that is the worst spell in the game, which should tell you a lot about what's coming up. Let's go to number 2. Look, friends. We all love Glug Cider. Look at how friendly our wormy boy is. He's so cool. He's such a cool unit that it is so tragic that I have to rank him so poorly. This unit is unbelievable. It is a banner unit. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that this is the first banner unit in this list. It is the first banner unit that I consider terrible, and it's the second worst card in game. This card, let's read this for a second. You pay 4 space, 4 extract, so you have to have 4 echoes on your floor. It does some inspire thing that I just don't, no one cares about. Okay, great, yeah, you can heal with Spine Chief behind it if you have Infector, but yeah, what are you going to do? Place 7 space on your floor to do that? Collapse things together? Use it as a tank? Use literally anything else as a tank. You have Spine Chief, come on. Use him as a tank, dang it. And then this thing ultimately just has a revenge trigger that is still worse than Titan Sentry. The stupid shark is better even when you don't pay any of the extra costs, all right? No extract, no requirement for echoes to do damage, no 4 space, and even more importantly, Titan Sentry is an uncommon, so you can find it, actually. This thing's a rare. You go through all the work and you just high roll into a rare unit in Wormkin, and you see this and you go, what the hell is this? And the worst thing is that he gets, I mean, this is not actually factoring into my decision at all, but he baits people. He looks cool. He has 200 life. You'd think he'd be good. He only costs 1 ember. He's so bad. This unit is almost unplayable. If you can somehow play it, it is still terrible. It's bad because the banner draw priority functionality here significantly makes it worse. It forces you to have intrinsic cards that can guarantee the echoes on turn 1, like an intrinsic Soul Siphon, in order to even play him. But then once you play him, he extracts the echoes he needs to do damage. So you then have to overstack his floor to even play and then get value out of him. What's worse is that you almost always want to invest your Inspire triggers into other floors, like your Keeper of Echoes or your Shard Soul Carvers, okay? Or even your Inspire Chief, your Decayer. You want to be putting your Inspires into those floors. You're not going to be overstacking Glugsider's floor. So at best, this dude gets, what, 5 Reap into a unit that attacks? And then maybe that kills backlines? So you did all this work. And what, you kill a Shadewings? This is way out of proportion for how bad it is. This doesn't even do damage to the stupid tanks in front because they don't hit you. Because this 5 Reap is only to the attacking unit, it's not to the floor. So Titan Sentry is again even better because he kills everything on the floor, including the bosses in the back. So what the heck is going on here? This card is just unbelievable. It is so detrimental. You take this thing, it's stealing banner unit drafts from other more important cards, so it's detrimental in that way. It's detrimental even if you don't draft it, because seeing this in your card pack is a genuine failure. It is a less than 0. It is actively bad. You take this, you can't play it. You build your entire deck around playing this thing, and then you finally play it on turn 1 when you draw it, because draw priority, hilarious. And what? It does nothing. It doesn't even do as good of a job as your basic cards from the clan. I would rather just play Fracture on a Shadewings and kill it than play Glugsider. This card is so bad. Oh my god. And its infusion is even terrible, right? This looks okay. You can sometimes get away with it. Sometimes I put it into a Titan Sentry, but it takes 2 space. For the effect, it's not good. Titan Sentries is better. 20 health, not worth it for 2 space. This is really just underwhelming. No Wormkin unit wants this infusion. You can't self-infuse it because it forces you to take a space boss relic for this? Ugh. Come on, Glugsider, get out of the dirt. Like, this card is so bad. Oh my god. Yeah, that's number 2. All right, I had a lot to say there. Okay. Look, I know a lot of you are going to think that you know what my last card is. You think it's Consumer of Crowns. In fact, he didn't even make this list. He's in my honorable mentions. The worst card in game is Wilting Sapwood. Okay, let's talk about this. I just dunked on Glugsider for a good chunk of time. So if this is my worst card in game, why? Let's talk about this. This card is unbelievably bad for so many reasons. It is, first of all, let's just look at the infusion and get this out of the way. This infusion is Train Steward's infusion, basically. -2 Ember is essentially nothing here. It is, you get Train Steward's infusion from this. So the infusion doesn't exist, basically. Okay, cool. This thing's 2 Ember, 3 space. So that is a very expensive unit, okay? You're not only paying extra Ember, you're paying extra space, okay? This thing being 3 space creates a lot of problems in the clan because you want to be jamming this with something like a Windleton or something like that, but you can't without taking space. This thing's not a good tank. It has 30 life, 15 attack. Its ability says you gain Ember. Think about like the best case here. The best case is you somehow jam this with Windleton. You have root seeds. You are able to get like 10 Ember and then you play a bunch of cards. Okay, that's theoretically what you're looking for here. In practice, this card is just so do nothing that I would rather have literally anything else. The way you should look at this, I would rather have Glugsider than Wilting Sapwood. And why the heck do you think that is? Honestly, it's the infusion. Glugsider's infusion can be serviceable in a couple cases. Wilting Sapwood has nothing redeeming about it whatsoever. It takes your draws, okay? You play it down. This card does nothing. It is functionally nothing. It's like Titan Sentry, except it gives you Ember and hopes you draw things in the right order to take advantage of it. Most of the times, if this is getting hit enough to give you enough Ember to do anything fun, you didn't need that much Ember to begin with. Think about the most perfect use case for this. I'm thinking, I don't know, you have Permafrost, Intrinsic, Awoken's Rail Spike. You play this on turn 1, you get like 10 Ember, you draw your deck on turn 2 or something, and you did all of this for that. And you, instead of just, I don't know, scaling your main unit on turn 1, you spent a banner unit draft on this. This unit is so bad for the same reasons as Glugsider in a lot of ways, in that you get this instead of something else like an Animus or a Sweeper. You get this instead of, I don't know, Steel Singer or something like that. And this just takes up your draft, and you look at it and you go, no. Even in the best case, where you're imagining this with Endless and plus 25, you have to pay 2 Ember every turn for it, and it doesn't do anything. I think if they wanted to keep this card in the same kind of style as it is right now, they would need to play this and put like spikes on it. They need to give this thing like 30 spikes or something. And then, you know what? It kills units, and I can actually see it's doing something useful. So, yeah, there's that. I I honestly am so disappointed every time I see this card. I've tried it so many times in the base game. This card is bad. It is really bad. So, yeah. Okay. Wilting Sapwood. Oh, your disappointment to me, son. But yeah, let me quickly briefly cover my runner-ups list. So runner-ups list, Consumer of Crowns is on that for sure. I don't have him as that bad for a lot of reasons. I think he's genuinely fine. I think he would be even worse than he is if Queen Zimpling didn't exist. The fact that Queen Zimpling exists and Queen exists makes this pretty good. Honestly, I can find a lot of cases where doing 100 damage in a punch is fine. He's not good. He's on the runner-up list. He's probably like around number 11 or something, but he's not great and not that terrible. Again, Train Steward Infusion. But at least Consumer of Crowns pays out when you finally play him. He hits for 100. It's fine. Demon Fiend is on this short list, actively detrimental. 4 Ember, very hard to play. Main thing keeping him off the top 10. A pretty decent Largestone-esque infusion, plus 30, plus 30. We take these. It's fine. It has its moments. It's not great, but it's fine. That's the only thing keeping Demon Fiend out of the gutter. Next that I'm going to hit on real quick, Sharpen. Sharpen is a really bad card. It is bad scaling. Spikes cards are generally overcosted. It doesn't do much for you. It costs 2 Ember. This is really rough. The main thing is that sometimes you just need anything that says plus damage, and there have been cases where, sharpen is sharpen. It's fine. It's not a good card, but it's better than things like Inflame by a fair margin, so fair enough. This, at least with a +4, that's a permanent scaler, right? We'll take it. Permanent scaler in the sense of permanent for a combat, doesn't wear off, and yeah, I'm okay with it. I think it is better than Inflame in general. I mentioned Restoring Retreat. It's pretty rough, a very bad card, but Overstacking, it is a targeted card. It's good. It works with Iron Drop Cage. Hard for me to say it's that terrible. So it's fine. You can assemble a big floor of Steel Singers with this, which, you know what, we'll take it. It's fine. Yeah, honestly, the fact that it just targets a friend or any unit in general, I'm okay with it then. Let's see, Emberforge is next on this runner-up list. Yeah, he's pretty rough. He's not that bad. I've had times where his stats have been okay. I've used him as a tank. He's decent in your starter if you get it. His Ember can sometimes be useful. He's like a better version of Wilting Sapwood, which is kind of funny. I don't think he's that terrible. He could be better, but he's whatever. I wouldn't say he's fine. He's not fine. These cards I'm talking about are not good. Okay, these runner-ups are really bad, but at the same time, it's not bottom 10 material. The only melting card I really considered is actually two here. First is Wigless Recruitment. I think this card would be significantly better if it removed the buffs from enemies as well. If I could target an enemy with this and just remove their buffs, that would be good. This is fairly low impact. Has some neat synergies with the Fade's First Blade Relic. You get a bunch of rage out of it, which is cool. Sometimes this works if you are forced to take Wax and Spike for scaling and you just need to remove burnout from it, your backline or whatever. It's tough. That said, removing debuffs is pretty decent. This is something I have used to solve Patient before in dire circumstances. So, but it's not that great. It's also a free incant, so you can't really think of it that badly. Next one I want to talk about, Memento Mori. It's hard to scale and it's overcosted. It's the hardest to scale of any of these 3-cost big hit cards. It starts when you draw it at 0 damage, which is ridiculously bad. So Memento Mori is pretty down, bottom of the barrel. Let's see. I do rank Ambient Charge pretty terribly, but there are cases where this can generate an infinite for you. It also does burn your deck, theoretically, much stronger than Total Recall, because you can just kind of burn top cards. I think this is better than Total Recall. It also has synergy, obviously, since it says extract with things like Carving Koruska. 0 cost as well, which is fine. I think it's not good, but it's not as bad as Total Recall, and it can get you an infinite, so it's fine. And the only clanless card I'm going to hit on in this whole video, Spike Driver Colony. I don't think it's bottom of the barrel material. I don't think it's bottom 10, but there are runs where this saves my run and you get the Spike Driver Colony run of Destiny, but it's pretty tough. It's hard to configure this. It takes up an important event slot that you normally would want it to be literally anything else, and the payout is very low, right? It's just really hard. You need a very unique set of run circumstances to grab Spike Driver Colony and then be able to do anything useful with it before you duplicate the thing. What's worse is that it clogs your deck, right? You have 4 of these things. They're not even draw priority and you need them early for scaling. It can be tough. So it's a pretty bad one, but yeah, definitely the worst of these. And it's even worse than Train Steward. Train Stewards I actually rank pretty highly in the grand scheme of things. They're pretty decent when you have them, and Advanced Prototype exists, so don't hate on Big Stew. Big Stew is pretty good. So those are my runner-ups. I didn't want to spend too much time on those, keep this video from going too crazy. We're already at 49 minutes, but yeah. So, chew me up, spit me out, let me know what you think of my opinions. I'm happy to chat about them, and yeah. Hey, thanks a lot for watching this. I really appreciate your time. As always, you can give the video a like or a dislike if you want. You can subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and stay tuned for what's next. Take care, folks.